Hello and welcome. My name is Lieutenant Colonel Robert Bowden. I'm Michigan Wing's Vice Commander of Operations. And in this training today, we're going to take a look at how we audit sorties and WIMMers and how we create an E108. So who does this apply to? Well, this training is going to apply to any Michigan Wing Assistant DOs for the respective mission budget. So our assistant DO for pilot proficiency would be in charge of completing this process for the annual proficiency budget. Our assistant DO for member onboarding is going to be in charge of looking at the onboarding and return to flight budgets respectfully. Additionally, this applies to any wing level project officers, such as our Northern Strike Project Officer, our Encampment Orientation Flight Project Officer, working with your respective colleagues on the wing op staff. This training also is useful for emergency services officers who are in charge of the training budgets for emergency services training. And finally, incident commanders or finance admin section chiefs, while functioning on an actual search and rescue mission, may be called upon to audit their sorties and to complete the E108 at the conclusion of the mission. Additional help can always be obtained by reaching out to me or any other member of the wing operations team. We're all in it together and we can all help each other out. So, what is the timeline in order to complete these sortie audits? Well, you must do it on every sortie. So, even if the sortie doesn't have a fuel cost or fuel component with it, we still need to audit each and every sortie. Now, these audits can be done on a daily basis if you like. You could do them on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. Just realize if you're doing one of the longer periods, like a monthly basis, that if there are errors in the sorties, and we typically do find a handful of errors in every mission bucket, that the person may not still have that fuel receipt handy or might not remember the details of that flight, making it harder to accurately audit and correct the sorties. I find a combination of daily spot checks when I have time and then a weekly audit of all the previous weekly sorties seems to work really well. Now, one hard and fast rule is all these audits, all the E108 process must be done within 45 days of the sortie. If we fail to submit the paperwork within 45 days, Michigan Wing will be charged not only for the fuel, but also the flight costs. And then we have to charge that member who made those mistakes. So if you have someone that forgot a fuel receipt, it's on us as the wing to make sure we're helping our member out and keeping an eye out for them. Otherwise, the wing will be forced to charge back that member the entire cost of the flight, and no one wants to see that happen. Now, there are 4 areas to check in every sortie, and if you're in here routinely, either on the air or ground side, it really can become a very fast process. And in a few minutes, we're actually going to go through and create an E108 for a real Michigan mission in a few minutes. So we are going to check the sortie info page, the briefing, the debriefing, and then finally the receipts. Now I have a little trick in the workflow that I like to show everyone, but you can develop your own flow, your own process, but just make sure that all 4 areas are checked for each air and ground sortie. Now, there is extensive guidance available on the National Headquarters website under the operations section and then WIMMer's Guide that's going to tell you exactly what needs to be on each and every sortie. And over the next couple slides, I have summarized most of this information for you. So there are 2 pieces of required information that need to be on each and every sortie. It doesn't matter if it's a cadet orientation flight, a maintenance flight, proficiency. These 2 pieces of information need to be on every sortie. The first one is sortie objectives, And the second is route of flight. Now, you don't need to write an entire book in here. So the objective might be something as simple as encampment orientation flight. The route might be local or southeast Michigan or north of Salem VOR. Just give us a general area where you're going to be operating. Now, if you're doing a cross country or multi leg flight, that's where defining the airports such as Ann Arbor to Pontiac to Lansing to Saginaw back to Ann Arbor would be useful to tracking purposes. Now, it is not required, but it is a recommended best practice to enter NA if nothing is required in the field. But National has stated this is not a requirement. So if a pilot does not have NA in the field, frankly, in Michigan, we don't worry about it. Just keep moving on. As long as they have sortie objective and route of flight, we're good to go on this page. Now, the debriefing page has a lot of additional boxes. And this makes sense. We have a general overview of what they're going to do just based on the type of flight. So if they're going to do a cadet orientation flight or they're going to do a proficiency flight, well, we know the general overview because they chose a Profile 7 proficiency, or they chose cadet powered orientation flight number 1. There's a standard syllabus and we know what should be expected. The debriefing is telling us what actually occurred on that flight. Now, there's a couple fields here that are really important that in the past didn't make that much of a difference, but now it's critical that we fill them in correctly. So this is your engine start time and stop time based on your watch. Now, this is very important because failing to fill this in will cause the aircraft log to not show up in the correct order, and the maintenance module will not display the current location of the airplane correctly, as well as the current maintenance times correctly. So these fields are very important. You obviously have to have hobs and tack. If you used fuel, you need to enter the number of gallons you took, and the oil that you paid for on the sortie, and then the combined fuel and oil cost, along with the receipt number. Now, this is something that's become an issue, and that's why I highlighted it in yellow here. If you have multiple fuelings on a single sortie, so let's say you're doing a long flight, you top off at the beginning, and then you refuel at the end, you need to combine the fuel purchase costs and the oil used, if applicable, and enter that into these respective boxes. Then, under the remarks section, you should create an entry that says something like top off 12 gallons at $28 at PTK. And then after flight, refueled at Grand Rapids, where we were going, 8 gallons and the amount. This is really important for us to do the end of month audits that National sends us. We'll talk more about the credit card report in a few minutes, but this is something that's very important to help ensure that it's detected correctly. Now, if you're not using fuel, if no fuel was purchased, check the no fuel box. This helps free up money that Wimmers automatically reserves for that sortie. If this is not checked, Wimmers is still going to hold that money, even if nothing is entered in fuel cost. Now, the wing paid box should never be used in Michigan Wing. Michigan Wing is not using a wing credit card. In fact, there is no wing credit card for Michigan, so we should never be using this box. The box that we will be using is if you use the credit card in the airplane, you need to check the NHQ box. This is going to signal to National that the National credit card was used, and it will report it out correctly. Now, if for some reason the National credit card's not accepted by that vendor, it wasn't in the airplane, something happened, and the member has to pay for fuel themselves, this is where that direct pay to member box comes in. and their cap ID number will be entered in the reimburse to field. This is going to then pay that member directly, but it does require a special E108 to be generated. And we'll talk about E108s more in a few minutes. We have the fuel receipt, which we'll talk about in detail in the next slide. And then two fields that we have to fill out. You have to fill out the summary and the sortie effectiveness. Now, items such as results/deliverables, weather conditions, and remarks, as you can see from the descriptions National has put out, may not be applying to every mission. So it says weather conditions. If weather affected the outcome of the sortie, describe that impact. Well, if there was no weather effects, technically, I could make a strong argument that you don't need to fill this box in. Now, for good practice, most people will stick in VFR or NA, but again, it's not a requirement to do so. So as long as we have something under summary and sortie effectiveness set to successful, we're good to go in those areas. Now, that fuel and oil receipt needs to have 4 pieces of information added on by the pilot. This is in addition to the standard information that's required to be printed on the receipt, such as the fuel price, how many gallons you took, the address and name of the vendor, all that standard information. But additional information that we need to add on is the mission number, the sortie number or sortie numbers, the pilot's name, and the pilot's cap ID. Now, once we have checked all of that, we'll then move on to the E108 process. So typically, as a wing, we submit E108s every month after we've received the EFS credit card report from Brandy at headquarters, which comes in for the air side about the 8th of each month. Now, we've already done the auditing, hopefully, at this point. So once we check the credit card report and confirm there are no fuel anomalies, then we go ahead and submit the E108s. The reason we typically wait is because if there's an error in the credit card statement, let's say the fuel vendor actually took the tax off for us and the amount was different than the receipt uploaded, that then fails the audit check and we have to track down that receipt. Additionally, once this is submitted to National, the fields are all locked. So if you realize someone didn't fill in the briefing or debriefing correctly, there's no way to fix it. You have to go through me and Michigan Wing to reach out to the NOC, who then has to intervene, void the E108, remove that sortie, then send it back to the wing for processing, and then we start the whole E108 process again. So we want to avoid that. It's actually really embarrassing for me to call the NOC up and say, hey, Michigan Wing screwed up here. We have to void this E108. So we want to double check this before you submit it. Now, E108s must be done within 45 days of the sortie. Failing to do it within 45 days results in the wing being charged for that flight. And there's a handy report in e-services that will show you all sorties coming up to the 45-day mark. Additionally, some of us at Wing receive a lovely daily email from the NOC automatically through WIMMers of all sorties approaching that 45-day limit. I've really become a fan lately of the report in WIMMers because it's real time, and as we do E108s, it will clear it as we go. Now, only approved Wing staff members can submit and approve E108s. We don't want every pilot or every ground team leader out there doing their own E108s, just because of the items we mentioned above. So what we're going to do next is switch to a little bit of a demonstration. We're going to take a look at the information on the National website that was used as a source for this presentation. We'll then take a look at the report that Brandy sends out, that EFS Air report. We'll then jump into WIMMers and actually audit and create an E108 for one of our open missions. So let's get started. Okay, so we've hopped over to the National website and we've come to Emergency Services, Pilot Onboarding, and then WIMMers information. And within Wimmer's information, we've drilled down into the brief and debrief sorties area, which gives us all the information that we just saw on the slides. Now, additionally, there's tons of good other tips and tricks in here about navigating Wimmers, scheduling airplanes, the discrepancy log. I highly encourage you, if you haven't been through this new information, to take a look. It was updated within the last year or so, and it's really good overview of Wimmers, especially if you've been a long-time user and you're now starting to look at different areas you haven't prior seen. So every month, we get an email from Brandy at National Headquarters with the EFS Air Bill, as well as a report on Wimmer's sorties for that month. Now, what we're specifically looking at here is the air side. There is one that also comes out from the ground side as well. So we see in Brandy's email, there's a couple items here that she calls out specifically, making sure that the NHQ credit card box is checked, making sure the correct fuel amount is entered in for the cost, and then if there's more than one receipt on a sortie, please put them together as one file and attach them to the sortie under the receipt field. Same things we just talked about in the slides, just re-emphasizing that one more time. This is what really helps this process. And then we have two attachments here. So we'll go ahead and download both of these. The first one we're going to look at is the Wimmer's Aircraft Fuel Report. So I can come over to Michigan Wing, and we can see a list of fuel that was entered in e-services, and then if it showed up on the bill or not. Typically, the bill runs from about the 20th to the 30th of the month prior, so in this case, the 30th of June, all the way until, in this case, the 30th of July. Now, what we do is we have to check to see, is there anything in Wimmer's that was not on the bill. So in this case, no receipt was uploaded at the time this report was ran. If something was uploaded as a fuel cost, but not on the bill. And this is where those combining fuel together in a single sortie can come into play. The second report, which I would argue is the more important one, is the EFS air transactions. And this is something that I look at every month and will give everyone the thumbs up when the fuel amounts are correct. So in this case, we see we have a handful of sorties here that have alerts. So these were charges on the credit card, these ones I just highlighted, but we have no corresponding sortie or amount in Wimmer's. And a lot of these were actually bad charges that we've worked out with the FBOs. So the first one is an airport accidentally charged the credit card for the hangar rent. Well, that's not a good thing. So we had them reverse that. We had a receipt for while the plane was in maintenance that they did some fueling on it, and that accidentally got charged in here as well. Again, that was a mistake that had to be created. We had a couple sorties from encampment that just weren't in Wimmer's correctly. This is where we added multiple fuelings together, and the amounts weren't checking out correctly. So that's how these got on here. And then finally, we had a double billing from the same vendor. They accidentally ran the card twice. And we could tell that because you had two fuelings back to back. First receipt, the pilot had and just didn't get uploaded. So once we had the pilot upload the receipt, we had them confirm with the fuel vendor, yeah, we did not take the same exact amount twice within a 10-minute period, roughly. So in this case, it was the example of a vendor error. So once we've gone through and checked this, Then we can jump in. I'll give everyone in the wing the green light to go ahead and start validating sorties and doing the E108s. Okay, so we're in e-services now, and I'm going to come down to Wimmers, and we're actually going to do one of these. So we're going to come to the top flights, the AEM orientation program, and I'm going to come here and click on the number of air sorties. I'm going to do a quick filter by date to make sure it's in the correct order. And what I like to do when there's only a few sorties, such as this, I like to come in and hit brief, debrief. I'm holding on my PC the control button and clicking on them, which then opens them each up in a new tab. And then it's really simple. I just come to air sortie briefing. We got objective and route of flight. We also see the rest of the fields are filled out, which is awesome. Not required, but it's great to see someone doing that extra effort to fill in all the way. Then I close that. I come to the debriefing. Quick scan of the information on the page. Summaries filled out, set to successful. That one is all set too. And I'll continue on this process, objective, route of flight, making sure the briefing and debriefing are set on each of the sorties. And we can see it only takes a few moments here to go through all of these. In this case, we have a no fuel, which is great. And we see this is on a reload flight, which tells me the next one is probably the actual top flight. And again, there's a no fuel on this one. We have details about what occurred on the flight. And if I come to the final sortie, there's probably going to be a fuel amount here coming up pretty soon, because now they're going to have multiple sorties on that single receipt, which is perfectly fine and normal. And we see there's a note here in remarks. Even better, fuel is for the combined 3 sorties. This is a perfect example of what we want to see. If we want to see which pilot did this great job, we can come to sortie info. And we can see that was Dennis Hex. So awesome job to Dennis. If you see him around, give him a shout out that he was a great example of what you should be doing on each and every sortie. Finally, last one, this looks like his RTB back home. And I would expect to see a fuel receipt at the very end, which there is, and some notes on the flight. So we just audited in less than 2 minutes all the outstanding briefing and debriefing items. So then I will come here and I'm going to click on each fuel receipt, pilot name, ID, mission number, sortie number, $72. I check that here, $72. Next pilot was Joe Mancini. Name, cap ID, mission number, sortie number. He added some extra info on, like A19, which is the sortie type, and the number of hours. That's not required, but does not hurt anything. $78. And that checks here. And then finally, we're going to check Dennis Hex. Same information, and he perfectly lists the additional sorties on this mission, fueling. And the last one, same information. So these are all 100% good to go now. So at this point, we can create the E108. Now, I'm going to do something that's a little bit different. Because we're coming up to the very end of the fiscal year, I'm going to go ahead and submit the ones for the 18th even though they haven't shown up on the EFS report yet. We don't have issues with the fuel vendor up in Houghton Hancock that we've seen before. So I'm pretty confident I can trust those fuel receipts to be correct. And we're dealing with a small number of pilots here. When you get to the larger number of pilots or pilots that tend to have errors that we found, then I might hold off and only do the 2 sorties from July that we've already confirmed are on the credit card report, and then do the ones for August in about a week when the next report comes out. But for this demo, we're going to go ahead and do all of them. So I'm going to come up to Mission Info, Mission Reimbursement, and click Create New E108. From the drop-down, I'm going to choose NHQ, because that's whose credit card we used. And there were 4 sorties we looked at there. So we can individually select them or select all. And now I'm going to hit Submit E108, and we're done. Now, because it's a national credit card, we've done everything on our part as a wing right now. If we were reimbursing it to an individual member, then there's going to be an additional step where myself or Colonel Ballard has to go in and approve that E108 a second time because we're paying it to a member as opposed to just paying the national credit card statement. So now if I come back to that mission, come back to current missions, we'll grab our top flights, sort by date, we will see a little lock icon has appeared next to those sorties. We can no longer make changes to them. The only thing we could do now is reach out to the NOC and have them unlock that sortie. Now, the last useful tool that I want to point out here is the report. So if I come down here to Reports, under Support, Reports, E108 45-day alert report. I can choose Michigan Wing, and now Get Report, and it's going to show me all of the sorties that have time running out on them to do the E108. So the next one up we have is an Air Force proficiency that only has 3 days left, and some additional ones in July. So this is a mission that we typically audit once a month, and we do the E108s in bulk. And I'm guessing there is an issue with these couple sorties. That's why they weren't done on the July batch. And we need to do them before the next credit card statement comes out, because we have the credit card statement all the way up to the 30th. So we'll go ahead and get those taken care of, or the respective assistant DO, I should say, will get those taken care of today. And then this report will zero out and not show anything. Before we started this, and I failed to take a screenshot of it, it actually showed those top flights in this list. So in this video, we took a look at how you can create an E108, as well as what to look for when auditing sorties. I truly hope this helps, and look forward to answering any questions you may have in person. Have a wonderful day, and take care.